Welcome to our webinar today, Promise versus Hype, how to evaluate emerging learning technologies. This session is going to be all about how to know when your organization should take the leap, when it should implement new tools and new techniques, how to assess the feasibility and the viability of those different things that you might be considering. So my name is Steve Bowler. I am the Director of Marketing and Business Development here at Bottom Line Performance, and I am joined by one of Bottom Line Performance's greatest technical minds, in my opinion, Mr. Nick Shelton. Nick, why don't you introduce yourself and let people know what you do for our clients?
Thanks, Steve. Hi, I'm Nick. I help us evaluate new technology to kind of ensure we're staying on the cutting edge and providing the right technological solutions for our clients. And I'm also lucky enough to work with one of the best teams of learning technologists and content authors our industry has to offer.
Thanks, Nick. I happen to agree. And in my role, I work with our new customers and clients, and I help them scope their projects and figure out what technologies they should be using. And I also conduct a lot of our learning trends research activities here at BLP. I administer our annual learning trends survey, which we just recently launched this week. I think it's the fourth or fifth year in a row that we've done that. And we use those results to create our annual learning trends report, which we publish usually in January or February of each year. So I have an opportunity to do that, and then also guiding the session content and the things that we choose for our XLearn conference, which we now host annually each August or September. We hosted our first conference here this past year. So all of the work that we do, looking at the trends, looking at the technologies that are emerging, it certainly helps us with those things. But most importantly, we do all of that because we're trying to help our clients see what's possible, make the right technology decisions for their organizations, and know how to move themselves forward. So our organization, Bottom Line Performance, we are a custom learning, design, and development company. So it is literally our job to know about this stuff and to make smart decisions about which technologies to present or pitch to an organization, know which ones are going to be truly helpful for their situation, and know which ones are going to get people to their desired outcome. Because we're not just picking technologies and implementing things because VR headsets are cool, or we want to project a hologram onto our refrigerator or something like that. We're doing it because we're trying to increase sales or decrease safety incidents or some sort of operational efficiency that we hope to gain. So it's really important to know which technologies have the potential to help us do that and which ones are just a cool sounding session at a conference, or which ones are just kind of a glittery distraction. So we're going to talk a little bit about finding that balance today between when it's too early to implement a new technology, when it's too late, and when the time is right. And then Nick is going to walk us through some technology evaluation tools that we use internally when we are making decisions about technology that you can use to make smarter technology decisions. And we'll go through some sample evaluations of various technologies and trends as well, so that you can kind of see how our evaluation methods play out with some of the things that you're probably hearing about in the industry. And then we'll close out with sort of announcing our 2019 Learning Trends Survey. And I'll tell you guys a little bit more about that, and we'll give you information so that you can participate in that survey, which will ultimately be the guide for the trends report that we publish in a couple of months. So we created this webinar, and it was really a well-received session at this year's ATD International Conference, because we see it all the time, that organizations are challenged by technology, and sometimes it's technology that they already have that is not getting them the results they want. Sometimes it's the technology they wish they had that they really need to get results. Either way, technology is a constant challenge for all of us. Technology changes so quickly. The trends that we're hearing about that we're trying to keep up with, it seems like every year Some of them we keep hearing about over and over and over again that it's going to take off, it's going to take off, and it just seems like it takes forever. And then other ones pop up, and all of a sudden we are worried that we haven't adapted fast enough in our organization. I imagine many of you guys on the call feel similarly. Um, so the solution here is to think about a learning ecosystem. It's a very fancy sounding term, but what we mean by that is in today's model, it simply isn't enough to purchase a learning management system and upload courses to it and assign them to people and or run workshops in person. And it really takes a collection of tools to help people answer those how do I, what do I questions in the flow of their work, to get them the information, the tools, knowledge, behaviors they need to know when they need to know it. And there's a variety of tools that we should be considering to enable that. So I'm guessing we're at this webinar today because we're wanting to do that. We're wanting to have better tools, better technologies. And some people are obsessed with that. Some people are futurists and they chase the trends and they look to figure out what is possible. And perhaps they might select tools that are maybe a little bit too far out. Maybe their organization wasn't ready for. But we also have other folks who kind of run away, put their head in the sand a little bit, maybe wait too long. And by the time that you're looking at a tool or a technology, it's already, the time when it really should have been implemented has already passed you by. So we know that tech is always changing. That's a given, and it's only going to change faster as the years go on and the pace of innovation accelerates. So it's our job as learning professionals to make sure that the technologies that we select for our organizations is that technology solves real problems, that we're not just chasing the latest fad, the latest theme at the conference that we went to. We want to make small bets, run pilots, fail fast, try it with a single audience, try to get to a minimum viable product as quickly as possible. And we do that so that we don't end up wasting so much time and or money into a solution that we cut into any return on investment that we might see from implementing that technology.
Yeah, and to that, Genpact actually performed a study in 2016 called Putting Digital to Work the Lean Digital Way. And in this study, they estimated that technology represents 40% of the entire capital equipment cost in mature companies. And to take that number further, $539 billion was spent on tech, with approximately $394 billion that yielded insufficient return on investment. So that means 3 out of every $4 that was spent on a technological investment didn't yield the return that the company was expecting it to. So that's why we always, that's why we always start with a technical analysis. In order to ensure that our organization is getting the maximum return on investment and that your organizations are getting the maximum return on your technological investment and you're not wasting 3 out of every $4 or getting insufficient return on those dollars, we have kind of a high-level 6-step process that we like to use to dive into technology before we decide to move forward and implement it in our company. So first, I'm going to walk through the process kind of at a higher level, and then I'll kind of dive into a deeper case study of how we've implemented it with a technology that we implemented. But first, I kind of want to ask the question, how many of you have performed some form of formal technical analysis before adopting new technology?
And maybe share what the technology was if you can. So if it was a yes, tell us, really briefly what that technology was that you had to conduct your analysis on. Be curious to know. And also, let's expand this out a little bit as folks are typing. If you haven't done a formal technical analysis, please share a story of a new tool or technology that you were part of the adoption for that you wish there had been more analysis done before it was rolled out. I see this is very good. Did a very thorough analysis before selecting a new LMS. That is a great example. Traditional LMS, implementing degreed platform across the organization. That's very cool. A lot of people are saying yes, new LMS, and some folks are saying they haven't conducted one. So we've got a lot of LMS folks here, and we've got at least one person who's looking at one of these kind of newer learning platforms as well.
Yeah, that's great. So unless the technology that you're implementing is just a small, simple one, we highly recommend that any implementation of new technology, you're performing kind of a technical analysis. And our six-step process starts with a situational analysis. So first you need to identify the problem you're trying to solve with technology, because anytime you're reaching for new technology, it's because you have a problem that you're trying to solve. Maybe you need a new LMS because the old LMS is not providing the reporting or the features that your users require. Or maybe you need a new authoring tool because you want to go mobile and your tool doesn't provide it. Or maybe your competitors or partners are implementing a new technology and you need to keep pace. Any investment you're considering making in technology is because you're trying to solve some internal problem. And so you need to justify the cost or to generate future revenue through this technology to really justify its purchase. So in the situational analysis step, you need to identify what is the root cause of the problem you're trying to solve, and then what technology could provide the solution. So for a lot of you, that sounded like that was an LMS. So as you look at your problem, you should determine where the technology falls on the diffusion of innovation curve within your industry. So brand new tech has an increased cost, a smaller knowledge base, and a lot more risks associated with it. Whereas on the right side of the diffusion of innovation curve, old tech could be obsolete before you even put it on the shelf. You must adopt technology at the point for your organization that makes the most sense and provides the highest level of return on investment, which could be here based on the technology and the industry you're in, or it could be over here. The important thing is to, based on your analysis, determine where does the technology fall for our business, and is the return on our investment going to be sufficient in order to adopt this technology within our organization. The second step is to identify potential solutions. So you need to determine what success looks like and what exists on the market that fixes your problem. So you should make a list of what good looks like in terms of technology and or a list of requirements that may solve your problem. And then you can do a high-level search online to find providers that hit that mark. So once you do your precursory search, kind of based on reviews and high-level analysis, you can kind of filter out which technological tools on the market are likely the best fit. And so once you've done that, you can dive a little deeper to determine the right learning technological solution based on a more in-depth analysis of the items that rose to the top of your search. So once you have the few best items, you can evaluate them against your requirements and then filter that list to your top 2 or 3 technological solutions that solve your problem the best, and then create kind of a scorecard or a rubric that you're going to test the technology against, perform an internal pilot, get feedback from your key stakeholders, and gather insights along the way. Once you've performed that pilot, you have a lot of data, you have a lot of information from everyone who's involved. You need to decide, you need to pick which technology is going to best solve that problem and give you the maximum return on investment in your organization. So as you have researched more and more deeply throughout this process, by the time you make a technological decision, it will be a very informed and educated one because you have iterated a lot throughout the process. Step 5 is the actual implementation of the technology. So you really need to make a plan to integrate the learning or technological solution into your organization. The implementation of the tech is probably more important, if not as or more important as the actual selection of the technology. You need to make a plan for how you're going to implement this new technology within your organization, set a timeline, build training resources, Ensure adoption is easy for the people who are going to use it. You really want to empathize with the people who are going to use your technology and think about their needs, and then build a structure that will support the adoption of your technology. Most importantly, or one of the most important things, is whatever technology you're replacing, you should retire it quickly, because there's nothing worse than having to live in two systems. And then step 6 is to always iterate on technology. Monitor the usage of the new technology, identify and resolve usage or implementation gaps, listen to your users, and then continuously learn from them and improve your implementation. And don't be afraid to change directions if things aren't working the way you expected. So just kind of a high-level recap. We have our situational analysis, where we identify and diagnose the problem you're trying to solve with technology. You then identify at a high level what success looks like and potential solutions in the market. You evaluate the solutions that appear to solve your problem the best by performing a pilot with those top options. You make a decision based on data from your users and your pilot to decide which solution provides the most value to your organization. You implement that technology with a strong plan to ensure that everyone is successful and that your end users are going to be happy. And then you technologically iterate. You always listen to the people using the technology and do things to constantly improve and get better usage of the technology until it's time to repeat this process again. So as an example, a more in-depth example of how we use this process, we created a provide feedback tool, which was a web-based tool that allowed our clients to easily review the training content, such as e-learning courses or web applications that we were developing for them. So the process really allowed us to determine that we needed to build a custom developed tool versus what was on the market. And through going through this process, that's how we were able to come to that outcome. So step 1 again, our situational analysis. Why are we even here? What problem were we trying to solve at BLP? So we had a tool that an external company had developed for us to collect feedback from e-learning courses and things like that. We had been using it to varying levels of success for nearly 8 years. So we had a solution that worked most of the time. So it didn't always work. It was 8 years old. As our solutions got more advanced, we realized that there were issues, and the tool that we were using didn't advance with the technological or the training content that we were producing. And we realized that our problem, the root cause of why we were considering new technology, was that we had a lot of technical debt. Also, people just got tired of bumping their heads against the limitations of the technology or problems that the manual process of the technology required. So I'm going to dive into the technical debt a little bit. First thing, in our old tool, you had to manually set up the tool in a back end, which was incredibly manual. It was very easy to mess up, and messing it up could mean that a client could provide feedback, or a user could provide feedback to e-learning or website or whatever, and it could be lost, or it could go to the wrong place and it would be hard to act upon. Sometimes when reviewing the materials, the pop-up window that the user would provide feedback in would get lost behind the course and they couldn't find it. So the user experience was just so-so. It worked kind of, but it definitely could be better. Not to mention the tool, we had hundreds of courses. Here you can see IDs all the way up to 659. And there was no real way to organize or find a course that we wanted to pull feedback for easily, other than pressing Control F and searching for the title of your course and hoping there's no other course titled similarly. Then when we pulled feedback, we use a design-proof alpha, beta, gold master kind of process as we iterate on an e-learning course, for example. So if you can imagine, we have 660 or 700 courses in this tool, and we have 4 review phases, and we have internal and external review phases. And so we have somewhere around 5,000 to 7,000 pieces of feedback reports of feedback that we can pull from the system. And literally how we had to do that was find that correct feedback report from a dropdown of 5,000 or more items, which is very difficult to do. And then when we pulled reports, and I remind you, we didn't build this. We had a company build this for us before we did a lot of software development internally. But when we pulled reports, because a user who was reviewing things could put in HTML special characters and things like that, the download report button didn't work. So our users would have to copy and paste from the web browser into an Excel and hope they did that right. And then let's say, for example, we're implementing in Storyline. A user would have to link an arbitrary feedback ID to a feedback ID from the tool. So I guess the moral of the story is there were a lot of areas within this interaction of setting up the tool to collect feedback in which a user could mess it up. And who could blame them, right? Like there's a lot of steps, there's a lot of things to pay attention to. There's a lot of opportunity to, human error. We're human, we make errors. So we realized we needed a better solution because we really wanted to reduce the technical debt, one. And two, we really wanted to increase the experience, the user experience, not only for our own people because they were having a hard time with the tool, but also for our clients. So when they're reviewing courses, it looks better. The process is more seamless. The reports look better. And there's less opportunity to lose feedback, and so on and so forth. So we know what our problem is. So we need to determine what we do next. And so we need to go to step 2 and identify potential solutions that solved our problem. Again, our problem was we had a tool to collect feedback and it wasn't great. So in order to solve our problem, the first thing we need to do is we need to determine what good looks like. If we can imagine our perfect world in the future, what will it look like with that better technology? And so we made a list and we checked it twice. Fortunately for me, I had as a technological leader in the company and a guy who helped support the old tool, I had a long history of data of people just not liking the tool or complaining about it, or stories where it didn't work the way it was supposed to. So I was able to use all of this knowledge and also through meeting with internal stakeholders to build kind of a list of user stories from the entire history of us using the tool. Like, what would good look like? If we had a new tool, what do we want it to do? And then we took all of the items in our dream world and we prioritized it just like you would prioritize a backlog. And we decided, okay, everything above this line are the things our new tool have to do. They have to do it. If they don't do it, then it's not success. It's not solving our problem. And then what features were nice to have. So once we had that list, it made it possible for us to scan the technological landscape. And with our prioritized features list, we could then match software solutions that existed in the market to the features that we required to solve our problem best. And so once we kind of identified the top solutions, we decided to dig in, well, we had to dig in a little deeper to realize, okay, at a high level, these tools look like they will solve our problem and check a lot of the boxes, but we need to dig deeper to see which one really does the job and how will it feel to users. And in this step, you have to really empathize with the people who are going to use the technology in the end and really put yourself in their seat and think about how they would use it and the problems they would have. And you also have to realize that there's no one perfect technology. They all have pros, they all have cons. And so while you don't want to outright eliminate a tool from your search if it doesn't check one of the boxes, the prioritized list really helps you prioritize potential providers at a higher level. And so similar to how you prioritized your features list of what good looks like for the new technology, you then will start to be able to prioritize the solutions that you identified in the market. And so then it's time to evaluate the top 2 or 3 more deeply. Based on the scope of the technological change that you need to implement, in our instance, we picked a top few that we wanted to dig in a little more deeply. So what we did is we created a consistent criteria, and the consistent criteria was a pretty complex e-learning course with which we could load into each of these tools to test on a consistent basis. We kind of created a little rubric. How are we going to score these against the features that we require, and implemented it against the same set, the same materials. So yeah, we measured the tools against our criteria, and some of the tools that we measured are here, or that we evaluated are shown here. There are actually a lot of good tools. We went the deepest with Review Link, Review My eLearning, and Articulate Review. And you will know once you dive in a little deeper, even if you take a deeper look at 5 or 6 items, we were able to eliminate Zipboard pretty quickly just because of our client technological landscapes and things like that. So we really did our pilot with Review Link, Review My eLearning, the full pilot in Articulate Review. And these tools are great, and they do a very good job at what they're built to do. But we found that none of the tools really hit our criteria, and this is why it's so powerful to have that prioritized list of what good looks like, because while we were checking a lot of the boxes, each of the tools checked a lot of the boxes, but none of them really checked the boxes more than our old tool. There was some other manual thing that you had to do, or there were trade-offs with what our old tool did versus our new tool. And so in digging through all these tools, we got to a point where we realized that the technology that we want based on all of our years of experience in iterating to improve how our review process works didn't really exist in the market. And so we had to make a decision. And so we discussed kind of, if we were to build a tool, how long would it live? What is the future after our tool? And then what is the cost of building a tool? And the nice part was that we had a great list of features. And so we could use that list to determine approximately how long we thought it would take to build custom software that met our criteria better than any other software on the market. And with an approximate shelf life for how long we would use the tool, and the price that we estimated it would cost us internally to build, we decided that it was worthwhile to us, it was worthwhile to our people, it was worthwhile to the time savings we would get on each project, it was worthwhile for the better user experience for our reviewers to go ahead and implement a new technological solution that we built in-house. And so after we built it, we had to implement it. So we utilized our features list, and based on our cost value analysis, we prioritized, and we created a high level timeline for how we were going to build this thing and how we were going to release it to our employees, our course authors, our reviewers, and everyone. So we turned our features into backlog cards. That list of features that you saw earlier, we just turned them into backlog cards, and our estimates that we made in terms of how much this thing was going to cost us to build internally, well, that data was reused to plan our work to build the thing. And so that allowed us to really see how long it would take to build out the software. And so this included primary development, internal testing and iteration, piloting on an individual client project to see how the user experience was for them. We're testing the user experience over and over. We're creating training resources and materials complete. We held an administrator stakeholder meeting. We reviewed the results of our pilot with the client and made small tweaks because we're constantly iterating, constantly getting feedback. We were very agile about this. So we're making tiny improvements as we go. We knew with our features list what we wanted to do. And then once we made it do what we needed it to do, we made tiny increments to make it very polished. And then once we had it ready to be implemented, we held a 1.5 hour training session with internal users who are going to implement it. And then we got rid of the old tool and just went live with the new one. So I'm going to go back actually. So each step kind of built on the other and was very agile. So as you're implementing the technology, you want to make sure that you're listening as much as you're telling or teaching or providing materials. because it really goes back to the empathy with the people who are going to sit in the seat and use this tool on a daily basis. If you cannot get the people who are going to use it on a daily basis to want to use it on a daily basis, it's not going to be successful. So it's really important as you're implementing that you're listening as much as you're implementing. And the trend continues. So after you implement, it's time to iterate. And iteration is all about listening and responding. So what's going on with the technology? What could go better? What resources could exist to better educate your users? You don't pull the trigger and assume everything is perfect. Don't turn a page and go to the next technological implementation. Even if the rollout goes well, and our rollout went really well, we had very few issues, and I think part of that is because we retired the old technology very quickly and just moved on to the new one. But there were still changes and there were still feature requests, and clients wanted a specific feature to be added, and our internal users were like, hey, I think this would be easier if we did X. And so it's this entire process is about research and listening, and then implementing and iterating in small bites, so that at the end of the day, the technological solution that you implement benefits everyone who uses it, and thus you get the return on investment that you're looking for. And those $3 out of $4 that you're spending based on the study, you're getting way more ROI for that money. So just a quick high-level recap again. You analyze the solution, you perform a situational analysis in which you determine the problem you're trying to solve with technology. You identify potential solutions in the market that help solve that technological problem. You evaluate solutions, and the few best ones will rise to the top based on your needs. You test them, you pilot them, you make a technological decision. Once you make a decision, stand firm and create a plan to implement it in a educated way that will benefit your users. And then after you have it implemented, it's all about listening and responding and making it better.
So that's one of our tools that we use, and it's a really, really good walkthrough of how Nick has approached some of the technology evaluations that we've had to do internally, just because we develop tools for others as part of our projects. We also have to do this internally. I see a really good question that's come through. So you created empathy maps, and Greg, yes. So we have really embraced design thinking tools, especially in this past year. And this particular webinar isn't going to get into design thinking a ton. However, we do have a design thinking toolkit ebook that, he says, I learned about them from you. So yes. So I don't know if when Nick was conducting his evaluation, if empathy mapping was a specific tool that was already in use, because this was a little while ago now, the story he's telling you. But I would tell you that now, anytime if we were going to start designing a new experience for a target population, and certainly on all of our client projects, we are doing empathy mapping. If you're curious to learn more about empathy maps, when we get to the end of this webinar, I will jump out and post some links here into the chat, and we will send you some resources of some of these tools we're talking about. But yes, good point, Greg. Thank you. So one tool that we have, and again, this is a PDF that is available on our website. This is a technology evaluation checklist that we've created, and it's essentially just a detailed rubric with some scoring attached to it so that we can run a trend, whether it's something like, should our organization start using game-based learning to train our sales force around certain topics, or whether it is a specific technology tool, such as, should we start using this new mobile learning authoring suite to publish training. And so it gives you a quantifiable way to assess. And I want to give you the caveat that this is a rubric that we created and it works well for us. But I imagine that if your organization needs to score something, you're probably going to have some different things that you're looking at. So this is a really good starting point, but this is not the be all end all final conversation around how you should evaluate tech. So first off, our first category that we look at is functionality, and we try to assess for whatever technology we're looking at. We want to note the different things that it can do for us. And this is us as the people who are creating a learning experience or a learning solution. So we've got lots of different categories there. And then we also want to look at what is that technology or what is that new way of learning? What is it going to help our learners do? So is it going to engage them in a way that's different from traditional training? Is it going to help them find and locate information that they need? Is it going to help them remember more from training than what they would otherwise remember from another method, et cetera, et cetera? So we look at that. And so then we then go on to the value. So now we're going to look at what is this hype that might be going on versus the actuality. So we're looking at tangible categories such as how easy is it for us to use? Does it integrate well into the other tools and processes that we already have? Or are we going to have to really kind of reinvent things to make this work? And again, how useful is it going to be as something that we're rolling out? So is it going to engage people? Is it going to make things cheaper? Is it going to make things easier? Is it going to improve the quality of the learning experience? Is it going to generate a positive image around our training? Lots of different categories there, and you might add your own as you're kind of thinking about how useful something would be. And so now we're looking at the risks. So this is things like IT security, information asset protection, infrastructure not being in place, any hidden costs, whether it be time or money that might pop up, perhaps negative buzz that might be generated if we don't get our implementation right. And so all of those categories, we're giving them a score. 1, 2, or 3 points. And so we have whether or not the technology is likely to create an undesirable outcome. So that's a 1. A 2 is likely to create an acceptable outcome. And a 3 is likely to create a very desirable outcome. So higher the score, the better on this rubric. And so now we are looking at our cost. So we're going to look at the hard costs, so the actual subscription charge or cost for the project. We're going to look at the ongoing maintenance. And we're also going to look at the soft costs. So how much time does it take to learn? How much time does it take to make it work? How much time will it take to integrate it into our workflow and also to support it? So the kind of those hidden costs that can creep in when you're integrating a technology. And so now we flipped it. So a 1 is the cost is likely higher than what we're willing to tolerate. A 2 is likely acceptable. And a 3 is that the cost is likely lower than what we would expect. And so from there, we created these bands or categories, and we tested it with a few different examples to see how things were coming out. And so you can see that we go all the way from technology grading out as not being desirable for our organization at this time, to the technology may be optimal, but we need to explore it, to a technology likely being optimal, and we probably need a good reason to rule it out, and then finally a technology being a critical area of need for our organization. And so based off of that, we will decide whether or not we should be conducting a small pilot, whether it's something that we already know we don't need to go through. We really need to recommend this for full scale adoption as quickly as possible, even if we have to do some testing to get there, or whether it's something we should reassess in 6 months, which is a very valid conclusion to come to. And then finally, if it's something that we should just ignore entirely. So Nick is going to walk you through an example now of how this a popular tool that you've probably been hearing more and more about, Articulate Rise, which is a great, very, very simple authoring tool for multi-device learning. And he's going to walk you through how he's graded that out.
Great. Yeah, let's look at Articulate Rise kind of through the lens of this rubric. So You could argue that Rise lets you do all of these things, but I'm going to kind of focus on these key areas checked here. So Rise really allows you to create responsive courses, as Steve said, with one of the easiest authoring tools in the industry. Rise is incredibly simple to create content in. You can distribute those courses to reviewers or use the share link. There's a link that you can share out to anyone in the world within Rise to gather feedback. And then alternatively, you have a review tool built into Articulate 360 with which you can solicit user feedback for your Rise courses. In terms of enabling feedback, Rise is standards compliant. So your LMS can track standard interaction data as you would expect. Or again, you can use the review tool to solicit improvements from your learners. And I would argue that one of the best features of Rise, which is a part of Articulate 360, are the team and collaboration features. And this requires a team subscription to Articulate 360, but multiple people can be collaborating on the same Articulate Rise course simultaneously. And the collaboration features also allow you to create reusable assets and share them with your team. So what does it help learners do? Again, you could argue for all of these, but Rise really allows you to engage your learners on devices that your old authoring tool or course system may not have supported. And most of the interactions within Rise are pretty intuitive. They used web best practices to build interactions that make sense both mobily and on the desktop. In terms of finding and locating information with the table of contents within Rise and their basic search feature, content can really quickly be chunked and you can find and access what you're looking for on the go. So Rise courses could be hosted on your LMS, or they could be saved to your web portal and added to the home screen of your user's phone to allow them to quickly have a Rise reference guide that they can access materials from. And while the quizzing features for assessment could use some additional features in Rise, there are some pretty good options. And one of the things that I've seen and that I like about Rise is potentially, if you used it for nothing else, you could use Rise as a mobile quiz building platform for a relatively reasonable price tag. It does a lot more than that, but that's one way you could use it. So as we score each of these individual categories, I'd argue that Rise is the easiest responsive authoring tool that exists in the market. If you can use Microsoft PowerPoint, you can use Rise. And honestly, even if you're not that good at PowerPoint, you could probably figure out how to use Rise because it is incredibly intuitive, incredibly simple. That's why Articulate is, near the top in the course authoring environment within our industry. And in terms of usefulness, Rise puts learning content in the pockets of our users, and it's incredibly easy to create and it's intuitive. So very quickly, with a subscription or with a partner who utilizes Articulate Rise, you can, if you're not on mobile already, create mobile content very quickly and easily. In terms of risks associated with Rise, I gave it a 2. So other tools or custom software development may give you a little more flexibility than Rise. Rise is very templated. They've given you some best practices and some best activities to follow. However, after a while, Rise looks pretty uniform, right? You can tell what Rise is. So if you wanted something slightly more custom or slightly more advanced, there are other authoring tools in the industry or custom software development that you could do. So the risk is that you may choose Rise and lose some of the flexibility that you may be used to with a more robust authoring tool because you kind of have to stay within the Articulate Rise framework. In terms of the true hard cost, again, we flipped it, so I gave it a 3. For an individual subscription, it's $999 a month to Articulate 360. And for a team, it's $1,299. And I would argue, even if you only use Rise, it's probably worth it. But the Articulate 360 subscription also gives you access to the latest and greatest storyline, the latest and greatest Articulate presenter, mobile apps, a video screenshotting tool, and perhaps the most advantageous is their entire content library of images, as well as the ability to really iterate within a team. So in terms of the cost, using Rise alone, you could probably justify the cost of a subscription. And if you really think about the things we talked about earlier, how you could implement it even further, the collaboration features for a team account could really speed up your time of development. And then in terms of true soft costs, again, it is probably the most intuitive authoring tool that exists on the market. It's very quick to pick up, which is good for us because we will often develop training content for some of our big clients using the tool, and then we'll help educate them and get them started on how to iterate on that content. So it's really easy to pick up, and that's one of the most powerful aspects of Articulate Rise. So in terms of scoring it, that's a 14. There was only one thing that I didn't give a full 3, and that's primarily because Rise kind of looks like Rise after a while. And so interpreting the score, it's likely a critical technology for our organization, and maybe that doesn't necessarily mean that Rise is our end-all be-all solution, but as I said before, typically to get on mobile, you're using a more complex authoring tool and or custom software development or web development or whatever to get mobile courses out the door. Well, with Articulate Rise, it is a more cost-conscious alternative that almost anyone could pick up and learn and iterate and create course content for. So my recommendation for Articulate Rise is a full-scale adoption. We started small, and we've been doing more and more with a lot of our clients. And so now we're in the process of putting Articulate Rise and Articulate 360 in the hands of all of our developers. We still use other tools. We're still using Captivate for some of their latest and greatest features, and we're still using Lectoras and other tools that are out there. But in terms of another kind of technological piece in our arsenal, we're going to put Rise in the hands of all of our developers.
Thanks, Nick. So I'm going to take you through the same exercise now, but now we're going to evaluate a couple learning trends here to give you a picture of how these scores would shake out. So I'm going to start with one trend that it's been around now for a few years and has really picked up and moved into the mainstream. And we'll compare that to how something would score that is a little bit more cutting edge. So let's talk about games and gamification and using those in a learning context. I imagine a lot of you guys have now at least done a little bit where you've had a learning game, or maybe you rolled out something that was gamified using game elements in a non-game context. We certainly do this in many, many projects now at BLP across a lot of different types of clients and industries. So let's talk about why. Let's talk about how this scores out when we're using our checklist here. So first off, what does a game let you do? Well, that's pretty broad. We can certainly design a game or a gamified experience to do a whole lot of different things, and there really wasn't a limit here that we felt like was holding us back from scoring out how a game could let us create learning, distribute it, assess learning, have the ability to provide feedback, etc. And the same is really true for learners here. So a game, obviously, one of the main reasons we'd want to use a game or game-based learning would be to engage. We could design a game so that someone could find and locate information. The feedback loops that are inherently part of games can certainly help people retain knowledge. A game could be designed so that someone could collaborate with other learners or compete. And then practicing and assessing knowledge are also inherently some of the advantages of a well-designed learning game. So there really aren't a lot of drawbacks there. So we scored the usability for us, and this might be different for you if you don't have folks that are able to easily develop games in-house, or a partner that you are working with that might score out lower for you. But for us, that's a 3. And the usefulness as well, very useful, lots of different ways that a game-based solution can be beneficial to learners. The risks here. So we gave it a little bit more risk because There are organizations where it takes a little bit more time, it takes a little bit more effort to really think through the IT considerations, to think through if an organization isn't used to using games, it's going to be a little bit different than traditional training approach. So we went ahead and scored that as a 1, assuming the worst. As far as costs, the cost we kind of put it right in the middle. It really depends on how complex you want a game-based solution to be. Certainly, it's going to be more complex and probably more costly than just rolling out a more simple, like an Articulate Rise course, for example. But it doesn't have to be. There's lots of different ways to manage that, but we still felt like it was kind of middle of the road. And so that really comes out, if we add all that up, that's a score of 11. Which says that the learning technology is likely optimal for our organization. And I feel pretty good about that score. I feel like that holds true, where generally speaking, some sort of a learning game or gamified intervention is usually optimal for a lot of our clients, but it really depends on how it's designed, how it's developed, and we have to customize it to fit the need. So in most cases, we would recommend to an organization that they conduct a small pilot and try something out with a small group before rolling it out to a larger audience if they haven't done it before. So Nick, I'm going to let you do AR, and then I'll close out with one final trend that we want to score for you, as we have just a few minutes left.
So augmented reality, aside from the cool factor, allows you to layer learning on top of the real world. So you're looking through your phone and then you're seeing augmented items on top of the real world. It's very cool. You can assess how learners are progressing by analyzing their real world performance against the frequency with which they're utilizing or data that you're receiving from the augmented environment. And then you can use the same data to kind of better understand where that content could be improved based on the items that the user is trying to perform in the real world. So picture you're in a factory and there's some heavy machinery, and you could put a code next to a specific panel and provide just-in-time information for how to best utilize that in an augmented environment. So I go up to the panel, I could whip out my phone, kind of look through my phone and see specific information about what I should do for specific tasks related to that item. So in terms of what does it help learners do, AR is really cool. So you can have that app that scans codes in your factory to give them just-in-time information. They're about to do something that's critical to your plant, your factory, your lab, whatever it may be. You can provide them just-in-time contextual information as they're doing it. And so they're able to learn, do, learn, do, learn, do. And now they get to a point where they've kind of mastered it, which helps them retain that information better and practice the process of doing with that information right next to it, layered on top of it in the augmented environment. And so through the use of analytics, you can really assess how users are improving in their process. In terms of hype versus actuality, we rated usability a 2 because AR, you kind of get it. You kind of, once you've done AR before, you use your phone and you kind of understand it. It's still a new technology, so that's why it's not quite a 3. But it makes a lot of sense once you're in the environment. And then in terms of usefulness, the content is very engaging and it definitely allows us to do things that we've never done before. But again, it's a 2 because it's so new, and frequently we're finding that people are just trying to shoehorn AR into learning situations where maybe it doesn't make sense just because of the cool factor. And that's one of the risks too, is that you see AR and it's the shiny thing that you see at the conference, and so you want to implement it. There are good use cases for AR where you could get a lot of value, but the risk is always, does this shiny new thing yield the performance outcomes we're looking for? And sometimes with AR, it's not the right technological solution. So in terms of cost, again, all of these right down the middle, I give it a 2 because the truth of the matter is now there are web programming languages that you can use to build AR more simply than before. And there are also authoring tools that are starting to emerge that are more robust than the standard authoring tool. But that would allow you to create, if you have some 3D experience and some programming experience, to allow you to create augmented reality simulations without the level of expertise that you would have needed before. So overall, that gives AR a score of 10, which means that this learning technology may be optimal for our organization. So we are actually conducting a small pilot, and we're playing around with AR. We're using some of the JavaScript frameworks to do it by hand, and we're using some of the tools that are now available on the market to produce e-learning that are similar to like an authoring tool. It's very early, so we're pitching it to some of our clients for the situations, the learning experiences where it makes sense. And we're also saying no to some of them where we don't think it makes sense. So we're conducting small exercises where it makes sense in terms of providing value to the end user.
Awesome. So we have 3 minutes left. So I'm going to give you a spoiler alert here. We have our final evaluation, chatbots for learning. We have a few projects going on right now where we are creating chatbots for learning. They are a great way to give someone a quick reference, a quick way to look up information. You can ask or text a chatbot or use a chat in a web window to get information really quickly. There's a lot of usefulness to be had there, but there is a little bit of barrier just because it's not yet something people are used to. Definitely not very, it's really not that costly to create a chatbot the way that we're currently doing them. You don't have any, unless you don't really have any visual assets to create or anything like that, which makes chatbots kind of similar to augmented reality, where it may be optimal for an organization. It's something that we are doing some small pilots for various organizations where we're building chatbots for them so that they can find out if that works for them. So I want to give you guys a chance to, if you have any questions, throw those up in the question window. And while we do that, I want to give you a chance to take our, you'll never know that link. So I will send out the link here to our Learning Trends survey, and I'll post that in the question window here.
I will make a call out. Greg Gilbert mentioned, and I think he's talking about Articulate Rise, that the Articulate 360 subscription is per year, not per month. So per month, the price tag I mentioned, $12.99, is a little high, but that's actually per year. Thanks, Greg.
Yes, great call out, Greg. So I've got a couple links I'm going to post in the chat here as we close out. I'm just pulling them up for you. So the first one here is a link, and we will send these to you as well. So there is your link to your Learning Trends survey. So please take 5 minutes, share your thoughts with us. We're going to use those survey results to inform our next Learning Trends report that will come out early 2019 with our trends and predictions for 2019. And then I've got a couple other things here. So the technology evaluation checklist that we've been referencing, I'm posting a link where you can download that. And then finally, we had a great question about design thinking, and or somebody who referenced empathy mapping, which is another good tool for assessing what your learners need before you implement that. So there's a link where you can access that design thinking ebook as well, all in the chat. We will email those direct PDFs to you in our follow-up email. The session was recorded, so you will be able to access that at any time. And if we'll stick around here for another minute or two, but otherwise, that's all we have for you. So thank you for attending our webinar today. I hope you found it useful. And stay tuned, because we will be having more of these sessions, and we will be reaching out to those who have attended in the past when we do have those coming up. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.